2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Delusions of Grandeur. I am one of your hosts, but today we're going to be discussing another film on our pathway through Days of Future Past. But Forrest, why don't you give us what film did we go on about for today's discussion?
Thank you, Dave. Tonight we are discussing 1981's Escape from New York, directed by John Carpenter, and starring Kurt Russell as S.D. Snake Plissken. Also starring Donald Pleasance as the president of the United States of America. Isaac Hayes as the Duke of New York. Adrienne Barbeau. Harry Dean Stanton, Ernest Borgnine. It's an all-star cast. Lee Van Cleef, Tom Atkins. But anyway, the movie was released in 1981 and was set in the then future of 1997, where according to the opening narration by Jamie Lee Curtis, crime in America had shot up by 400% in 1988. So New York City, well, specifically Manhattan, has been sectioned off from the rest of America, and America sends all of its criminals and other degenerates. They dump all their criminals and degenerates there. Mm-hmm. But the president, Air Force One, en route to an international summit, is crashed by terrorists, or by radicals. And the president is held hostage by the inmates of Manhattan Island. A new prisoner, Snake Plissken, is sent in to rescue the president, and he only has 24 hours to do so. Okay, so I'm just gonna go around asking everybody what if this is their first time seeing it. Mo, is this your first time seeing Escape from New York?
Mo, you're on mute.
Mo, you're mute.
You're a little courtesy. Okay. Never hurt anyone there. I was trying to say some shit prior to that too, which I do apologize. Year I came into the world, apparently it just all went to shit. Crime rate shot up by 400%, and all of a sudden we end up with Snake Plissken. No, this is definitely not the first time that I've seen this movie. I watched it a ton. I have it like 4 times over on different VHS elements. It was really cool to get it recently on that. What was it? Scream Factory Blu-ray. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much what I watched it on this time, and it absolutely kicked ass. It was cool to see it again. It's just definitely one that I have a lot of nostalgia for, especially being a huge fan of the Metal Gear Solid video game franchise. It's hard not to kind of call back to this one when it comes to that stuff. So, and I'm sure Forrest will echo those sentiments when he gets around to his shit here. But yeah, it's super influential. It's trendsetter in its own way, and I have huge nostalgia for this and the second movie that we'll talk about tonight. So,
great. All right,
definitely one that's been a staple of my childhood and not my first viewing by any means.
Excellent. Jake, is this your first time seeing Escape from New York?
It is. Now I know with what Mo said about it being influential, I know that to be true. I have heard of this movie many times in passing. We, of course, did do that Project Snake low-budget espionage film, which was inspired in part by this, and of course, the Metal Gear series. And I had not realized this. Hold on a second. had I read this before this afternoon, I would have made a point to watch this sooner. But a movie I did watch growing up, I've read a comment that it was kind of a comedic riff on the Snake character, which is Kurt Russell's classic Captain Ron. I need to rewatch that again one of these days. It's sitting here waiting to be watched. So that's, I have seen things influenced by the film. I know that Tarantino has cited it as an influence, and and of course many action films since then.
It's hard not to. It plays out so smoothly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
but again, like a lot of Carpenter's movies, I knew it better by reputation than by actual firsthand experience. And like a lot of his films that I have watched, my initial impression is a little bit disappointed. It's not a bad movie. I found it entertaining and interesting. And in fairness, I have been incredibly narcoleptic the last few days, so I did miss moments in this film, and especially
you always talking about falling asleep during shit.
I do that too much.
We might be approaching that point where we have to just accept you're narcoleptic in general.
I am a little bit, unfortunately. But overall, I found it interesting. The Pliskin character is a lot of fun. He definitely is, and so is the Duke. The Duke was a fun.
Yeah.
I love that stylish car. I mean, we'll have to talk about that car.
Yes.
The
music.
You can't go around with that.
Probably that is one of my dream cars right there.
And just in general, you can't go wrong with.
I don't even give a shit about cars really, but it's like I want one with some chandeliers on it.
Same here. All right. Dave, is this your first time seeing Escape from New York? Dave?
David.
I'll go to. Okay, in the meantime, I'll go over to Brandon. Is this your first time seeing Escape from New York?
Well, when I sang in front of the Statue of Liberty in '97,
cool.
I said hello to the Duke. And but New York, they must have cleaned it up with the expectance of my coming over there.
Just for you.
Well, that was old school Rudy Giuliani who cleaned it up back when he was America's mayor.
I just want to know more about Brandon singing in front of the.
Yeah.
That's what
I used to have pictures. I don't have them anymore, but there were a bunch of Japanese tourists that, boy, this sounds very bad saying that they had they had cameras and all of that, much like the stereotype, I guess. But the movie itself, my father was a huge fan of these post-apocalyptic films. Mad Max, Rising Storm, Wetware,
Terminator,
yep.
Regarding
a lot of these post-apocalyptic films, we were inundated with them back in the 80s and early 90s, and he wanted to watch them all. So, of course, we got to watch this. He always loved Snake Plissken, and I have to admit, it is a fun film. I enjoyed it back then when I watched it as a child, and I enjoy it to this day as an adult, rewatching it. It's good fun. It's not my favorite of John Carpenter's films, obviously, but still, it is still an awesome film. It's still very enjoyable and is very iconic to this day.
Excellent.
Still need to get Jake to see They Live, though.
One day.
Jake, I think, would really actually love They Live.
Definitely, for sure.
Become a fast favorite of his.
Because it's getting a re-release, so.
Yep, 4K.
Okay. Dave, this is your first time seeing Escape from New York.
No, it is definitely not. This was definitely a film in my rotation growing up. I think I remember renting it on VHS back in the day, and also it coming on to like USA Network or TNT or whatnot a lot of times. So no, this was definitely an action film that was in my repertoire.
Movies for guys who like movies, I think.
Right. So I always liked the bad boy. I mean, the thing is, I kind of grew up with him as a clean cut kid too. So it was kind of a contrast.
Yeah,
with
actually,
when he.
I mean, this was actually the very. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Like he played in the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes with Disney, and
yeah. Well, this was the movie that got him taken seriously as an actor in Hollywood. Because up to that point, all he had done was squeaky clean Disney movies.
And that's cool and everything. And I respect the fuck out of you. Like, I guess we'll call you the Kurt Russellers. But it's just. Most of us didn't know him from that shit, so we knew him from like Tango and Cash, fucking and
Trouble in Little China.
What's funny is that one of his earliest roles was in an Elvis movie called "It Happened at the World's Fair," where he just played a kid who kicked Mike in the head.
That,
so,
like on the commentary or in one of the featurettes, or like we had just done Elvis or whatever, and we were like, "Let's do this." Thing, and that's
John. That was also directed by John Carpenter.
Not to mention that. Yeah, I was gonna say Kurt Russell played Elvis on top of being in a movie with the real Elvis.
Yep.
Right.
Anyway, Dave, please continue.
I'm sorry.
Well, and I always kind of like the bad boy, let's kick some ass kind of a film too. I mean, it's kind of a revenge film as well because you get the whole okay, we need you to get this guy out in 24 hours, okay? But here's the thing: we're gonna inject you with some shit first, and he's like. I'm going to kill you when I get done with this.
Dude, I mean, it's video game shit. You know what I mean? Like, the first movie is a video game, and it got made into video games. And then the second movie is kind of calling back to the fact that like this is video game shit. But at the same time, like doing that same shit they did in the original stuff, which was clearly video game shit. But they. Are kind of self-aware about it, I guess.
Well, the whole injecting shit into your neck or I blow you up, to keep them in line. I'm pretty sure that was this movie may very well have been the direct inspiration for that in the whole Suicide Squad idea. So it's like, so there you go. That's another way that it was influential. And
right.
Yeah.
Which I want to check. I forget the year when I'm looking up the year when the Suicide Squad actually. So the first version of the Suicide Squad characters actually debuted in September 1959, and then the more modern
largely different.
They did it again, I think, at the end of the 80s, but I don't know at what point I don't know at what point they introduced the thermite bombs in the neck. That may have been
forever.
That sounds like a more 80s idea, and so the point being that's definitely accurate.
Right.
Look at certain little things like that is like a cool nod.
Could have been. All right. Anything else you wanted to add, Dave?
Not that I know of. I mean, I pretty much basically enjoyed both of these films, and I think they improved upon each other. And we'll get into this later with the second film, but I fully believe that Escape from LA is a remake of this film. So.
All right. Over to you, Dane. Is this your first time seeing Escape from New York?
Yes, it is, and I got to watch it on my Studio Canal 4K edition from the UK before the 4K of the American version will. And is it scheduled to come out in the US? Because I know that like Prince of Darknesses and They Live is for Scream Factory. I'm almost certain that it probably will be, but I
This
have
was a
that.
first time watch for you, Will.
Yes, it was, but I got to watch
That's
it on my
gnarly, bro.
super. Well, but I got to watch it on my ultra super duper exclusive full version with the cool cover there. Had to go up and get it.
So I
But yeah,
wasn't the only
this is my first time, which I have to
And
say,
were you
like
my friend,
with
you'd
a
have
lot of.
seen this on VHS many times, and then I would have eventually made you
Oh, I
buy
know.
a Blu-ray copy.
Well,
I
well, there were. I mean, I'm still catching up with a lot of the John Carpenter films,
fair
and I
enough.
love
I
all
mean,
the
you
ones.
get to enjoy them for the first
I,
time right now, you know. So
I mean, I really love the ones that I've seen, and like I dug this movie quite a bit. Little fun fact. So John Carpenter, upon doing his film school, in his time in film school, he was really influenced by Howard Hawks and by I want to say John Ford, but especially Howard Hawks. And he wanted to do westerns, and they weren't really commercially viable in the late '70s when he really got started. And
yep. So you just
but
made
he
movies
managed to.
westerns.
Well, he got to infuse other genres with Western elements, and you see that particularly like in movies like The Thing and with I'd say a little bit like this. Now this is kind of so Kurt Russell basically in Big Trouble in Little China and in The Hateful Eight, which obviously was a Tarantino film, but like there he's doing a clear John Wayne.
John Wayne.
I kind of get the sense. Well, I get in
Well,
here he's
Clint
evoking
Eastwood.
more Clint Eastwood,
yeah.
and he plays more of a Clint Eastwood type character in this, but it's very much in a Western vein. But still, even if you didn't know that, it still functions as one of the films that would kind of epitomize '80s sci-fi action, and it definitely you can see the influence all over the place. You can see we mentioned Metal Gear Solid. You see it's just dripping with influence. I do think it manages. The thing I like the most about it is that it's set in an alternate 1997, as we know. But what I like about it is that it manages to transcend the fact that it's set in a very specific time and an alternate timeline at that, because again the Soviet Union still exists in this 1997, but it manages to transcend all of that by, I think, being very mythic. It feels like once you get inside Manhattan, it feels very mythic. Like he feels. I love it
It feels
whenever he
lived,
descends.
you know.
Well,
It
when he
feels like
descends.
it's an actual place, you know.
Well,
And
when it even more than an actual place, when he descends the World Trade Center and he goes down into the bowels, it feels very hellish. It feels very subterranean, and it feels like its own thing. It doesn't feel. It feels like you go from a timely place where it's all politics, all geopolitical issues and stuff, and then once you get into Manhattan, then it's like that's hell on earth, and it feels very mythic, and I mean that in the best possible way. So I think that kind of helps it to last, on top of the fact that there's not a whole lot about that version of New York itself that really ties it to any one era, especially because the cab is very old that they drive around in, and they don't really have much in the way of technology or anything. So that helps it to feel like its own little world. But yeah, I dug it. I mean, it's classic Carpenter. It's it definitely belongs in the pantheon of his classics and all that.
We're good. All right, and myself. Okay, so this is far from my first time watching it. I've seen it many, many times. Carpenter is my favorite filmmaker. Actually, I've even got my Halloween T-shirt on for tonight for my Carpenter fandom. But no, the first one I think I saw this movie was on. I want to say it was on TNT when I was a teenager. My dad had seen it long before I was born. So he was like, "Oh, hey, it's Escape from New York." And then later on, as I was getting more into Carpenter, I rented it on VHS. And just immediately got hooked. I love the gritty this, even though it's supposed to be set in what was then the future. There's still like a very grit. I like the gritty tone to it. Like actually, because Brandon, you were talking about how post-apocalyptic sci-fi was a big thing in the late 70s and 80s. Also, what was big around that time was New York as the setting of dark gritty action thrillers.
Yeah, dystopian shit.
Oh, yeah.
Dystopian New
Death
York
Wish.
was like
Death Wish, The Warriors, Nighthawks, Escape from New York.
Yeah.
Although I'm kind of disappointed. Although I wish that they had actually had the Statue of Liberty in the middle of the street like they did in the posters. I actually had that. I actually did get have a poster of the movie. I got it at a record store in Manhattan. But that's one thing I wish that was in the movie. But yeah, I do like. Also, like I didn't grow up with watching. I do watch. Even though I did grow up watching Disney movies, but I wasn't really familiar with Kurt Russell as a Disney star. I pretty much knew Kurt Russell as an action star because of this movie.
Yeah.
And but the whole cast is great. The whole cast, and he was, and like Dan was saying, he's definitely channeling Clint Eastwood,
Right.
And I think again, and look, if you look at his career after that, it's like he was pretty like that solidified him as a guy who could actually act. He wasn't just some pretty boy Disney kid. He was kind of like the Zac Efron of that era. In that
Zac Efron could definitely stand to do a movie like this. I think I don't know if he could pull it off, but like
he has definitely tried to swing for the fences in the last couple of years.
I did want to say these were the top films of 1981 at this point in time.
Hey.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
On Golden Pond. Superman 2.
That's a good film.
Arthur.
That's a good film.
Stripes.
The Superman 2 came out in 1980.
The Cannonball Run.
I was. It didn't come to America until 81 though.
Chariots of Fire. For Your Eyes Only. The Four Seasons and Time Bandits. These were the top 10 of that.
Chariots of Fire. Okay, let's be real here. Stripes, Cannonball Run are the ones that you have to see immediately. Yeah.
And Raiders.
I haven't seen.
Blasphemy.
I haven't seen.
Anyway.
What's up?
Oh no, I was just going to say. Anyway, I was just because some of my other thoughts on it, as far as impressions. I love I love John Carpenter's synth score. I actually listened to it a lot. Actually, I saw a few years ago.
It's amazing, dude. I mean, the thing is they botch it in the second movie because they make it too loud.
But actually, I did see a couple years ago. I did see John Carpenter perform live in Manhattan, and the first track he came out. The first track they played. The opening track was "Escape" was the main theme from this movie.
Yeah, but was it with the dumb one that they did for LA where it was like too much drums?
No, it was the original. It was the original.
That's what I'm saying. Like that first one is fucking perfect.
Yeah.
It hits you right in that fucking. I don't know what it is, but it's like it hits you right in that level where you want action, but at the same time you want cool characters.
Yeah,
it's hard to put a score into words, but I think that's one of the easiest ones to do it with.
Yeah,
it sets the tone nicely for what you're expecting.
It's and when they make it all loud and shit in the second one, it's I don't know, man.
It was the 90s. And the budget was about 10 times the budget of this one.
Go ahead.
You were saying
Well,
something,
is
Dave?
that really the score's fault though, or is that the
No, it's 100% the people's fault. Yeah.
I think it was the fact that they had about 10 times the budget of this one.
Well, the second one, they felt the need to hit us with like 5 alternative rock, heavy metal songs, like right in a row
Yeah.
inside of the movie.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. in
We'll get to
Yeah,
that.
we'll
Yeah.
get to that.
Yeah.
But this theme is pretty much perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, it is.
One of
And
the
I will say, I wish I had the Duke's car.
in history. You know,
Mhm.
Like I'm also not a car enthusiast, but I wish I had the Duke's car.
it runs right through,
Yeah,
right through your
Right.
fucking whole body.
Oh, that hoopty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you, I will have to say though, I'm just going to throw it out there. Mo's right. The music in this film could not have been improved all that much, but you can't help but thinking they had Isaac Hayes.
Yeah.
If Isaac
yeah.
Hayes and
He could have
John
contributed
Carpenter
something.
had done something together, it might have been epic.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Right, but how much would that have improved this movie? Is what I'm saying. Like,
I don't know if it would
they're
have.
gonna be like, he's got an patch. You know, I don't understand how the fuck they're gonna do like a number that's really gonna improve this movie specifically.
Right.
Well, where Isaac Hayes is involved, you never know.
He's got
You never know.
Well, tiny little patch. Yeah, I don't see it.
Who knows? Maybe this is the part where the earliest beginnings of the chef starting in this one.
You know, obviously we'll touch on this more when we get to Escape from LA, but this is a great example of having something so simplistically beautiful,
Right.
and improving on it by even a slight margin in your own mind probably makes it suck. You know.
So let's get in. So let's get into the plot a little bit more.
Okay.
So we have Snake Plissken, who is being brought in by police guards.
For robbing the
and meanwhile, all this shit is happening. While this shit is happening, the president, who is evidently played by Donald Pleasence,
Evidently.
has a British accent for some reason.
Oh,
Yes,
I'm sorry, Isaac.
I love that.
He ends up having to go through an escape pod from Air Force One as it was being dive bombed into Manhattan area, where he was kidnapped and held for hostage or ransom by the people of Manhattan. So Snake Plissken is brought in, and he's told to basically, okay, you have to get this suitcase and the president back within 24 hours. The only thing is they inject him with some kind of backup serum because they want an insurance that he's
It's basically
on time.
You know,
two small little artery bombs, basically embedded in his arteries, and to prevent him, as their insurance policy.
Yep.
Which let's get some of the obvious stuff out of the way right off the bat. So we've got Air Force One crashing near the Twin
World
Towers.
Trade Center. Yeah.
Near
20 years
the
before
Twin
that
Towers.
happened.
Yeah, and actually, 12 years before the World Trade Center bombing, let alone obviously 9/11. But we've got that, and then we've also got a one-eyed Western-esque hero who was known for having robbed,
Federal Reserve.
just like Rooster Cogburn. But again, he doesn't talk like John Wayne. He talks more like Clint Eastwood. But again, there's already establishing that kind of lineage. Right
there's
then
another
also,
There's another fun nod to John Wayne. I can't remember which movie it was supposed to be, but the repeated line of "I thought you were dead" is apparently And that's and I wanted to ask Brandon, was this where you got the idea of using that with Catherwood?
I did actually.
That
it
was
wasn't
great.
necessarily, but everybody once we got there, we got into on the joke pretty well.
That's lovely. I love like learning things like that behind the scenes. Weird guys like you. So it's great.
Well, but that's just those are some obvious things we have to get out of the way. Plus the fact that it's the old reluctant hero story. The person who has to be put on assignment, which that was in Commando. It was Arnold was in retirement. This is different. He's a prisoner. Yeah. But it's that same idea of the reluctant action hero who has to be put on assignment to do the heroic thing. So we've got that
for the government.
Yeah, exactly.
For the government and for humanity.
Yeah, and to give it one more Western tie, who is giving him that assignment but Lee Van Cleef. Yep, exactly. So again, we've got a very strong
absolutely
Western
phenomenal
there.
Dude. Yeah, you can't go wrong with Lee Van Cleef with any role in any type of even pseudo Western thing. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
So, but that's
kill it.
Those are just some obvious things we gotta get out of the way there, because they're so much a part of the legacy of this film.
The equation of things.
I'm sure once we get into the Escape from LA stuff, we'll talk more about it's very much more on the nose of Western. Yeah. This first movie, maybe not so much. Yeah, it was.
I would argue the opposite. I think this one was more obviously a Western. The other one felt more like, and I'll get into this more later, but it felt more like the first one crossed with Batman Forever, crossed with attempts at Hollywood parody, but we'll get
there. Because of your viewpoint on it at the time of watching it too. I mean, the first one really is more subtle about being a Western.
Well, the first one is more subtle generally.
So
and of course you had Russell, who went on to do Tombstone. And
Tombstone, he did. And Bone Tomahawk for Westerns.
Oh, right. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, I had a different take on Snake's character in mind. I know that there's a lot of talk that he did a great job acting it out and all that stuff, and I agree in a lot of ways. But to me, he came across as more of a parody. Of the action heroes of the time, and not necessarily a straight-edged, serious action hero. And that's what made the movie for me more than anything. Is that I felt like it was poking fun.
Charles Bronson was the original choice for Snake. Charles Bronson, another Western, regular in the Western genre. He was the first choice to play Snake.
Well, let's be real. Well,
choice.
Well, let's be real with Kurt Russell. We all love Kurt Russell, but he has always, even at his best, I think he has always had one foot in comedy. I'm thinking of with Big Trouble in Little China and with The Hateful Eight. Overall, Big Trouble in Little China has but that one has more comedic elements. But Hateful Eight, he in both instances he's playing John Wayne basically, more so overtly in Big Trouble in Little China. But you can totally hear the John Wayne in The Hateful Eight, and then in here you can hear that he's trying to do a Clint Eastwood, and that's why he speaks so softly.
He's more self-aware than maybe other.
Yeah, I'm not saying that as a bad thing at all.
Yeah, exactly, it makes it fun as shit. But
I tend to I like actors that have that self-awareness, a good. I think Christopher Walken is able to deliver good performances while also being fully self-aware of what he's doing.
Again, no one plays Christopher Walken better than Walken.
Exactly.
As far as the idea of a parodic performance, I think that Big Trouble was much more of a parody of John Wayne than this was. this was more like an homage to Clint Eastwood. It was
that's what I was looking at.
At various points felt like, Kurt Russell thought the lines were way sweeter than they were because he had a hand in writing it.
Over the top.
Well, you're thinking of Escape from L.A. That one he helped write.
That's what I'm talking about. Like the role in general, like it evolves from somebody that's doing something, completely.
Well, of course, but it's more so with Kurt Russell that he
and gets a bit.
Well, it's more so with Kurt Russell that I think it's like. Well, with Kurt Russell, I think the point we're trying to get at is that he, despite being a kick-ass action star and a great actor, he's somebody who you can see the lineage like very clearly and very overtly. I think you could say, just because, which is not bad. It's just more so of like it's a stylistic choice, and so in this case, it's like he is Kurt Russell, but it's very heavily by way of this other iconic star. And again, there's nothing wrong with knowing that that's there. It's just an observation. Now, to be fair, somebody like a Snake Plissken is most definitely more appropriately in the mold of Clint Eastwood because he's that kind of person who doesn't have to be the peacock, the cock of the walk in the way that John Wayne would, because John Wayne was always very strutting and always very had a presence that was very overt, whereas Clint Eastwood was more silent but deadly, and Snake Plissken is that way.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say another good comparison to draw with recent films that we've done. Russell has said repeatedly, from what I understand, that Plissken is one of his favorite roles, and he apparently lobbied for a long time to make Escape from L.A. It was partly because he wanted to revisit the role that they made it in the first place. And in a lot of ways, one could draw a comparison with Jack Nicholson as the Joker, because Nicholson really, really enjoyed that role. He really got a lot out of it. But if you're watching it, it doesn't really necessarily look like a super deep and developed performance. It doesn't necessarily it does look like a performance and an over-the-top one at that. But you can definitely see the actor having fun in the role. And so there's definitely some similarity there, I think. This character is a little more subdued in some ways, but...
Actually, so Forrest, I'm sorry, we kind of probably cut you off at what you were trying to do to move forward. So,
all right. So anyway, Snake's been injected. So he's been injected with the serum. He is sent into Manhattan via glider and lands at the top of the World Trade Center, where he begins his search for the president. And the street, he's walking these desolate streets, and ends up in a theater, with this like vaudeville drag show, where he tracks because the president had a tracking device on him, but he ends up, and it turns out it's not the president. It's Red the Drunk from Back to the Future.
Was that him?
That was him.
Huh.
And also, you get introduced to the cabbie briefly, and I love that character. He's probably my favorite.
Ernest Borgnine, who was also in Hanny Calder, another Western connection,
and The Wild Bunch.
Yep.
And The Devil's Reign.
But not Devil's Rejects.
No. But let's if we're might be jumping the gun. My favorite scene is actually that one where he goes into that vaudeville thing and he goes down into the depths and he has to turn around and you have the famous screenshot, with him holding the gun. Right. Because again, I like the theme of dissension, because you go from what was at the time the highest point in Manhattan, the World Trade Center, go from the highest point, the pinnacle of man's achievement in the United States, all the way down to the bowels. And He has
almost like Pyramus going after Thisbe, if I remember correctly, or what
that
was
or
it, the
like,
Greek tragedy where he had to go and grab his the soul of his lover and never look back.
That was Orpheus, right?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of too. But it's like that's just a classic. That's why I meant the myth. That felt very mythic. It's the classic descension from Olympus down to Hades. And you see that very clearly in that moment. Really, the mood is heavy, and it's a movie. It's a movie that largely keeps moving, but that's probably the most moody part of the whole film, and that really sets the tone.
I don't know why, but I was feeling the frustration that Snake was feeling at the moment when he had found, even though I've seen this movie a lot, I could feel the frustration that he was feeling when he found that tracker and he had nothing to go on. He had no information, nobody, he didn't know how to proceed, and he didn't have very long to live. So I thought that was really well done there, because it gives you that kind of feeling of helplessness. Though I hadn't felt it other times I watched it, I did this time. So
but much like our dear Rooster Cogburn, he got through it because he had true grit. Indeed. And notice that his eye patch was on the same side as John Wayne's.
And okay, so Cabby takes Snake to Brain, who's staked out at the New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue, where Brain, played by Harry Dean Stanton, he basically comes up. He's an engineer. He basically finds ways to make technology possible within the confines of the Manhattan prison island. And he knows that he's also aware that actually Cabby is aware that the president is being held by the Duke of New York. But to avoid being seen, but first they take him to the Duke, who knows where they're holding the president, all the ins and outs, how to get off the island.
Well, and also you got Brain, who also has plans of his own, played by Harry Dean Stanton.
Of course, there's before you even get to those areas, you get to see the parade, which was how you get first introduced to the Duke. And that is really awesome when you see those cars coming down with the chandeliers on the headlights.
Yeah,
it is just a sight. It kind of has a reflection to Joker's parade in New York in a way. Yeah. It sets that same interest, and something that they repeat again with Escape from L.A. Having a little parade.
This was 2 years after The Warriors, which was also a New York gangs running wild kind of movie.
A gritty action thriller. Also,
and kind of comic booky too, much like this is kind of comic booky. But yeah, it's another notable comparison. Plus, we've got Isaac Hayes there is our Duke, which is just the perfect casting there. After having done Shaft, this theme for Shaft, but before South Park kind of gave him a career resurgence.
And you've got the Romero character, who was played by Frank Doubleday. He's kind of a freaky character.
Yes. I actually worked on a film shoot with his daughter.
Oh, cool. Yeah. But when he shows up to tell Lee Van Cleef's little party parade that they've got to leave, and he starts to count down, and then after they leave, he does this like vampiric that just gets me every time. It gets underneath my skin.
Yep. Well, you mentioned vampire. He's kind of like the Renfield if the Duke is sort of like Dracula of the
right.
Yeah, the Duke is a cool character because I think that if the Duke had not been so full of things as they were, I really do think that he and Snake would have been able to work together. But I think that there was just enough separation of him looking as like, well, I'm above this dude, that it eventually led to that. I think like I said, communication would have probably solved the movie.
He was too busy in having pleasure in torturing the presidents and making sure that he made sure that he called him the Duke, the King of New York,
the A number one.
Which let me bring up one tiny little beef about the plot of this thing. It's small, but it's something I find interesting, and it specifically regards the president, who I have to say, very well played, very well characterized. He's just this asshole that, he doesn't really reveal the full nature of his sort of moral bankruptcy until the end. And even then, it's not so much moral bankruptcy; it's more of just apathy, which is good. I think that's well written, well played. My little, nudge, little beef with so he's handcuffed to the case, and my brain immediately goes, he's got the football, which has the nuclear launch codes. But no, it's not. It's a cassette tape with forget, what was it, a weapon or because it was the thing he was going to present.
Actually, it was an energy. That was the thing. It was a nuclear fusion.
That's right. Nuclear
fusion. It was a little bit less sinister than the others. It was more of a hopeful thing. We're using this to have clean energy for the world.
Yeah. Well, just as far as I bring it up because I'm like, as far as MacGuffins go, I have to say that's one of the weaker ones. I think it would have been a little. My brain immediately went to the football because I know for a fact that the football never leaves the president's side. Like, it's always physically near him, and it's like that. I don't know.
They actually had to do a report not long ago to analyze what happens, because usually during inauguration the president's there and hands it over. What happens to the codes if the president is not there at the inauguration, which is kind of cool how they do it. I mean, they actually deactivate the codes that the other one's still carrying it at that moment. They deactivate those codes, activate new ones, and hand those new ones over. It's just kind of a cool thing how it works.
I would think you'd have to, just because, regardless of if it's a tense transition like it's going to be or not, it's like, wouldn't you want to, just for security's sake, I would think you'd want new codes just in case. But but still, it's like I thought about that. And I was like, I thought that the actual thing they were after was kind of weak. But
wasn't it an 8-track tape?
No, it was a
cassette. It was a cassette.
Yeah,
it should have been a CD. I mean, come on, 97, definitely a CD.
Yeah, well, but it's just cassettes were still being made, but you're right, CDs were definitely the norm.
81, it would have definitely been a futuristic idea. I don't know. When did they really start pressing CDs? Was it?
I mean, there were CDs in the early 80s. It just was, you had to be rich.
Yeah,
that was they were high end.
Yeah, that was high end.
They were definitely high end back in the 80s, but they did exist, but they were high end. And then 90s is when they became really mainstream, but they still made cassettes. All throughout the 90s, but as far as MacGuffins go, I thought that was probably the weakest aspect of the movie, just because they mention it one time, and now, to be fair, it's more about rescuing the president than it is about the tape. The tape is more incidental, but it's still that I felt could have been stronger. Although I have to say that throughout the movie, I couldn't help but hear in my head, "Are you a bad enough dude to rescue the president?"
The weird thing about this movie that I find interesting, that is very different, is that as you go through the movie, you're realizing on the surface, you're thinking rescue the president, but they make it clear that cassette is all they really want. If the president dies, he dies.
Yeah,
they just want that cassette. And
I mean, this movie was actually written during. Carpenter said he wrote this movie during the Watergate era.
Well, I guess they would have probably been willing to drop it at that point.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point you bring up, which is that was something that I think kind of died with the
Nixon administration.
Well, because think about it, because the decade prior you had the assassination of John F. Kennedy, so you had this immortalization of the president as this heroic figure. Then with Nixon, you had the idea the president is can not only go down in flames, but also in some ways is kind of dispensable. So there's something else to protect beyond the man occupying the office. So I mean, I think that's a very important point to bring up.
Okay, and Brain guides Snake to the Duke's quarters in a train yard, where Snake gets where in an attempt to free the president, he is captured. He is caught by the Duke and his goons, and forced to do a gladiatorial battle against another one of the Duke's, one of his larger goons in the middle of Grand Central Terminal. But not before the Duke asks who Snake is. And turns out the Duke knows him, and that he heard he was dead. Right. So, but anyway, so the president is captured once again, and along with Snake.
Meanwhile, I guess Snake has been shot in the leg by something, and he ends
got arrow in the leg.
Yep. So he ends up being taken into this freight area. And meanwhile, Brain and Maggie are figuring out, okay, where did he come in from? And they found out that they figured out that he had landed on top of the World Trade Center. So they ended up starting to hatch a plan of their own, but they ended up coming along with the cabbie and Snake, and in the end, so I think their sense of being on the right side was actually more in place than than betraying them for Snake for the Duke.
Right. They ultimately got the heroic. Well, after Snake is victorious in the gladiatorial gladiatorial battle, and the president is freed. First they get pursued to the World Trade Center, where the glider is knocked off the Twin Towers. So they end up taking Cabby ends up taking them to the Queensboro Bridge, where Brain had the plan had the map of where all the mines were laid out.
Yep.
Every bridge and tunnel leading into Manhattan has been mined off to discourage inmates from escaping.
And one thing that we forgot to mention is they went down Bourbon Street?
Bourbon Street's in New Orleans.
Yeah, where they ended up taking one of Duke's cars, and taking it down one of the most dangerous streets in this Manhattan prison area, because evidently there was a whole mob of line of people that were throwing stones and whatever the fuck they could throw at the car.
Yeah,
and I like this. This is my favorite moment in the film, because he turns the car around and backs the fuck into that whole
pile of cars,
mess of cars that. And that's how they escape, because you think that there really is no escape for them at the moment. But you know,
yeah, a lot of peril. Yeah, Snake has dodged a lot of perils. This like Hershey. At one point, he winds up in an abandoned coffee house, talking to a prostitute. But she ends up getting grabbed by a bunch of sewer dwellers, whom he has to avoid.
But
Oh yeah. By the way, when those people nowhere out of the sewers and shit, I couldn't help but hear Michael Jackson's "Beat It" in my head, which obviously came out 1 year after this movie. But I was like, yeah, that totally vibing to me because that music video obviously had gang members arising from the sewer, and I was like, yeah, that's not lost on me.
So on the bridge is where we kind of get where they're speeding along in the cabbie, and somewhere in this moment is where apparently Snake has switched the audio for the original tape, because in the end we kind of figure that we kind of figure at the last moment, we're not told that he switched it, but evidently there's some tape of music that the cabbie actually plays, yes. And it's like jazzy and it kind of bluesy and but
well, I know what it is. It's a jazz instrumental cover of American Bandstand by Barry Manilow.
Right.
But we get the sawing in half of the taxi car. What do you all think of that moment when the car kind of just
explodes,
slides in half?
I like how they did
Bandstand Boogie, rather.
I did like how Brain had the information in the scoop of where all the mines are buried, right. But of course it's usually his direction. When they move in that direction, that's when they end up hitting the darn mines, and of course ends up being the death of him later, just not long after.
Poor cabin.
But they were going to use that map eventually, the original plan being to have the president at the lead, and then they were going to all escape from New York using the president as the hostage.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I liked how they did that. I thought it was interesting, especially since you've got the chase element added with the Duke bearing down on them.
You ever notice how much the Duke? Anyone ever notice how much the Duke's eye twitches as he's pursuing them?
Yeah, I did. I did notice that. I mean, that seemed like a deliberate characterization on his part.
And I do gotta say, after he has killed Maggie with the hoopty, when he gets down and looks at her, I cannot help but notice, but her boobs are falling out of her dress. So
there's a certain nickname she used to go. I would say there's a nickname that Adrienne Barbeau used to go by back then. I don't know if I should say it here.
You're more than welcome.
Barboobs.
Adrienne Barbeau. I would have said what Joe Bob Briggs said, which was Adrienne Barbeau and her two enormous talents.
But she is a very well-endowed woman. So
she was very attractive. She was very attractive and
very true.
Very likable actress.
Oh yeah. But ultimately,
she and John Carpenter were together for a while, weren't they?
They were married.
Yeah,
and they have a son. They have a son who plays in Carpenter's band.
There you go.
Yep.
So ultimately, Isaac Hayes ends up following after suit on foot with Snake and the president. He gets up first, and the hook that was being mechanically lured up the wall stopped. all of a sudden. And you think that Isaac Hayes is going to get him when the president shoots down with the AK-47 or whatever.
Yeah.
You're the Duke. You're the Duke.
Well, and this is why I feel like the president was not as the president was a politician. He was like a regular president at the time, but he wasn't a terrible person. Matter of fact, he could have just left Snake to die at that point. But
I think being held hostage and tortured gave him some sort of made him snap.
I think he had some camaraderie with Snake at the end there. And his mind, anyway.
It didn't make him snap all that badly, though. It was within reason, and I like the fact that he was kind of assholish, but he was more in the sense of just being kind of negligent and being like, I got to be on air in a few minutes. So he's clearly trying to not freak out, and he's trying to be the president. He's trying to be all diplomatic, trying to not let everyone know what all has happened. So it's like I couldn't 100% blame him. Like, yeah, he could have, like, if I were him, I would have said, hey, listen, I gotta go on air in a few seconds. Just stick around. I'll talk to you more in depth after I'm done, because I'm deeply thankful. But obviously he seemed kind of partially dismissive, but partially realistically shell-shocked. And so it was like I couldn't 100% blame the guy. So I was like, okay, that's some good nuance there,
He wasn't as blatantly evil as the president was in the second.
Oh no.
The second one was a megalomaniac, kind of a megalomaniac.
Well, he was basically like if Pat Robertson's political aspirations ever came to fruition. Because keep in mind that back in '92, he was making like a serious push to be president, and if he had gotten it, I'm sure, and if he'd gone all the way with it, then I'm sure he would have ended up like that guy.
Well, yeah, definitely something I want to cover when we hit the second film.
There's a lot to talk about the second film. Some that I think is better than this film, and others of which I'm like, what the fuck?
Well, there was a lot of WTF in the second film, for good and for bad.
But I'll say that the what the fuck moments that were bad were very, very what the fuck, but the what the fuck moments that were good, again, I think they trumped some of the best moments in this one. So,
all right. So Snake eventually gets over the wall. He gives the tape to Hulk, and is given the antidote to the serum.
Yeah, he had the EMF pulses that fried the bomb inside of his arteries or whatever.
Of course, Lee Van Cleef's character is kind of shaking in his boots when he's like, "So, Snake, are you going to kill me now?" And he's like, "I'm too tired. I'll think about it."
Right. So Hulk offers him another job.
I was going to say like that. You could tell again to do the Western ties. That totally reminded me of his Man in Black bounty hunter character in For a Few Dollars More, where he and Clint Eastwood, both the Man with No Name, they both do good work together, but just given the fact that they're both lone wolves, it would never work in the long term. They do good work together.
Right.
Okay, so the president is about to give his.
I suppose we can.
David, did he get cut off?
He might have again.
Looks like he froze again.
Okay.
Dum-dum.
All right. Anyway, actually, before this, Snake asked the president how he feels like knowing that so many people died trying to save him, and he's very, I guess
he seems shell shocked to me.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, again, it's like I can't blame the guy for being kind of distant because of what all he went through and what all he's got to do right then and there.
Right, and the president is about to give his speech. He puts the tape in the player, And yep, it's instead of the formula, it's the
Bandstand.
bandstand tune. While Snake makes off with the tape, with the real tape, with the actual tape, and Yank pulls it apart.
Yeah.
And walks off into the night. So that's pretty much the whole.
And we gotta take a moment to give a shout out to Donald Pleasance's reaction at that moment.
Yep.
It was just great.
Let me tell you though, as far as like what he says right before that was saying that what he's about to present or whatever will hopefully allow our great nation to live in peace. I think we could stand a little bit more jazz, a little bit more American Bandstand, a little bit more, a little bit more Barry Manilow to, offer up some world peace. I think you could totally spin that into a good message, a good PR stunt. Which I know Barry Manilow didn't do that song originally, but he kind of reinvented it.
Yeah.
But, point being, I think you could have totally taken that and run with it if you were the president and you were smart, but he looked a bit mortified. But nonetheless, I'd be like, music is the universal language, guys.
Right. All right. And so let's, I guess now we're going to go on, you were going to discuss special effects. What were the thoughts on the special effects of this movie?
Special effects were largely pretty practical. Like you saw some model shots, and you saw, that. Now, here's an interesting
actually
thing.
A lot of model shots. Actually, James Cameron did a lot of this, worked on the special effects for this movie.
That would explain it.
Yep.
They did a lot of matte paintings. They used.
They did. Yeah. Well, and one of the things, there's that plus the models. Now there are some optical shots that, like the plane, the glider, like some of those have obviously aged, but like for the most part, they hold up really well. Now, one thing that you notice with this is that, again, most of it is practical. I know that the computer displays, it was on crack.com. They had like a couple of
it was a model that was spray painted black, and they put like neon tape.
Yeah, that's right. Because on crack.com, they had a couple lists like this, but the one I'm thinking of is movie effects that you thought were CGI but were not, and that was one of them. And it definitely looked a lot better than most of the early primitive CGI effects or attempts at showing what computers were going to be like. Like I'm thinking of like Star Trek: The Motion Picture, how that tried to get all fancy with its digital screens and everything, and then this comes along and it looks light years ahead of other films of its era, even though it wasn't CGI at all.
Right. Okay. And I guess music. What's I know we discussed music a lot throughout the show tonight. But overall, thoughts on any additional thoughts on the music?
John Carpenter himself. Let's also, to be real here. So John Carpenter himself, he is someone who he's had his run as a director. He directed Ghost from Mars in 2001. He had a 9-year gap between that and The Ward. The Ward was his last feature film. He hasn't done one since. But he has kept up with his music, and now he's got more. Now he's got more soundtrack credits on IMDb than he has for soundtrack than he has for director, and so
a lot of that comes probably from Halloween sequels and fan films.
Well, that and also, but I think music always informed his work, even from the earliest days, and the fact that he could do that. And do it so well within the context of his own films that he directed and produced and wrote and all that stuff. It's like he's a real do-it-yourselfer, but I think that he isn't. Yeah, but he's also, I don't think, given nearly enough credit for just what a good composer he is. It's always in the context of the rest of what he does, which puts him in a similar category to like Charlie Chaplin, who doesn't get anywhere near enough credit as a composer because again he wrote the music and he wrote and directed and starred in and produced and owned the studio and all that stuff. But again,
Well, it
because of
says
that, it all blends together, and
it says Alan Howarth was associated with him on the film. Do we know how much in the music was he?
Well, he and John Carpenter became kind of a duo for most of the 80s. And like a lot of his scores, so like I think beginning around Halloween 2 and 3, they worked together, as well as like Ennio Morricone did most of the thing, but he and John Carpenter, they both John Carpenter and Alan Howarth, they kind of picked up the pieces of the music, like filled in a few things, but then like they were like the dynamic duo for the 80s, and then eventually it was John Carpenter going back either solo or mostly solo, like in Escape from LA. It was him and Shirley Walker from Batman the Animated Series. And they did actually, I like the score from Escape from LA more than the score from this, even though you wouldn't have the score from Escape from LA without this film having paved the way.
I have to agree. That's why I kind of kept quiet when Mo was kind of going on about how crappy it was.
Well, that's why I tried to interject there, which was to say, is that really the music's fault, or is it how it was mixed? Because I think the film itself, we're getting ahead, but the film itself was very loud, louder than this one, but loud overall, not just for music. But I do think the music in and of itself was actually better in the second one. But again, you wouldn't have gotten it without this music having paved the way. Kind of like the Terminator versus Terminator 2. The Terminator 2 score is better, but you wouldn't have gotten it without the themes being established in the first one.
All right. I think we're on to our favorite scenes, eh?
I think so.
Well, I said mine, which was the vaudeville club that kind of descends further and further into the underbelly of this hellish world. But if I already said that is my favorite, but like a close second would be the very caveman-like gladiatorial combat, which I love the fact that it starts off explicitly caveman-like with these two burly, bare-chested guys with clubs, which is baseball bats, but they're
with nails.
Baseball? Well, at first it's just normal baseball bats, but it's like what is a baseball bat if not a caveman club, just put to a different purpose, put to a different use? And then they upgrade to the nails in them, and they have the trash can shields, and it's like, okay, now it's a gladiator movie. So we kind of went up the evolutionary scale there for a minute. But that would be a close second. But I still think the iconic shot of him turning around with the gun in his hand while he's in this hellish place, I think that really says it all.
Yeah,
I think mine was the turnaround car back into the car mesh scenario. So I think I'm going to stay with that one.
Okay. For me, it's the parade. I mean, you gotta love the parade.
No Prince though.
No Prince this time, but Isaac Hayes is a pretty prolific figure himself.
Yeah,
but he didn't sing on it, so it doesn't count.
He's pretty fun. He's pretty funky. He was a pretty funky guy himself.
Oh yeah, well his funkiness definitely pervaded the frame. It just did not pervade our eardrums, unfortunately.
All right. Oh God, favorite scene. There's so many for this one. The glider one is definitely I really like. I thought it was really well done.
And they did a glider because it was supposed to be quiet and not easily detectable.
Exactly. That was the plan.
Yeah.
So that the gladiatorial scene was great. I would just say the Duke's like not any particular scene with it, but just the Duke's car. The chandeliers on the hood. I would put like I'm not a really big car enthusiast, but that along with the DeLorean, the Ecto-1, and the Tim Burton Batmobile are my dream cars.
Well, that's the ultimate post-apocalyptic pitmobile. That's for sure.
Well, I'm kind of partial to the James Dean spider. So,
What about you, Jake? What was your favorite scene?
Favorites.
Or
I'm
moment?
not sure there's like an extremely clear winner. Like I said, I really did love that moment with the reaction that Donald Pleasance had at the end when the tape was playing, and there were a couple of like various interactions that Snake would have with different individuals that were pretty fun.
Call me Snake.
I'd say a lot of his interactions with Lee Van Cleef were pretty good.
Yes.
Those would be probably my main ones I've mentioned.
All right. Anything else? Anything else anybody would like to add?
not that I know.
Well, I think it's a very good, solid addition to the '80s canon of John Carpenter films. It's not.
I would say
It's-
John Carpenter films, post-apocalyptic sci-fi films, and gritty action thrillers.
Yeah, definitely. Now, it's as far as personal favorites of his, like I'd say it's one of his strongest, but I will say that there are definitely other ones that I liked more. Like obviously,
I would probably put Halloween, The Thing, The Fog, and either Big Trouble in Little China or They Live ahead of this one.
yeah, I would too. But that's not to denigrate this one at all. It
No.
belongs amongst the illustrious canon, I have to say.
Okay. So I think that's everything. That's everything.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. So shortly we shall be going on about Escape from LA. So stay tuned for an exciting new adventure on the Inside Movies Galore channel. So we are definitely going to be snakely surprised. So without being a little Raiders of the Lost Ark here. So so stay tuned for that show, and have a great evening or morning wherever you are.
Right.
Say good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.